purpose and audience, assessing the writing situation. And in every writing assignment that you are to do, it is important to know what you're writing for, or who you're writing to, what is your purpose, and who's going to be reading your writing. So we have to assess the situation, and we want to ask ourselves several questions. And so maybe you're even asking, how do I approach a writing project? So this presentation will give you some key elements to keep in mind as you begin to perhaps even put together some pre-writing information that you've already generated. And so it's important to know what your purpose is and who your audience is. So before we begin, you might want to have your pages of your textbooks open to these that are on the screen for you here. And let's consider purpose and audience. First of all, let's talk about the subject. And so whether or not you've been given the subject, maybe you're told what to write about, you've been given a prompt, or you are able to select your own subject. First of all, why did you select that topic? What interests you about it? Do you have any questions about it and you need to do some further exploration? Why is the topic worthy of writing about it? And what could readers benefit from your discussion of it, or your comments about it? Do you need to do any narrowing down of the subject to be more specific, for example, maybe to fit within the page length requirements? And again, why are you writing? If you'll turn to page 3 in the writer's reference, this is section C1, Planning, you'll see a list of purposes there just under halfway down the page. For example, to inform, to summarize, to analyze, to evaluate, or just simply to call readers to action. Or maybe your purpose is a combination of some of these, and some papers do call for that. You have to combine a couple of purposes or maybe more. You'll definitely want to know who your readers are. How well informed are they of the subject? And what do you want them to learn? So your readers, are they educated? Are they, do they have some similar interests in this topic? And how, what's their stance? Are they, do they agree with you on the issue? Are they a hostile audience? And that doesn't mean angry necessarily. It just means that they are at the other end of the spectrum when it comes to agreeing with you. And so maybe they are a reader audience that totally disagrees with you. Well, you have to know how to approach that group of people. You would approach fence straddlers a little differently. Maybe they are on the verge of making a decision, and the way that you come across is extremely important. And so those are some things that you need to keep in mind. And then what is your relationship to the reader? Are you writing strictly for your instructor, which is primarily what you're going to be doing in the class, but beyond the course, you may be writing to a whole different readership. Your job may require that you write, and you may be writing to a supervisor to solicit some funds for some new equipment or something, and you would need to know exactly how to approach that purpose. Are you writing to another citizen? Are you writing to an expert in the field? Are you writing to propose legislation? So all of these reasons, all of these relationships with readers are important, and their education level as well. You're going to adopt a different tone and use different terminology when you write to, let's say, folks who are readers of the Wall Street Journal. Those are typically readers who have a good education. Most of them, I would say, bachelor's degree and higher, mostly higher. They're professionals. And readers of the local newspaper are typically, those types of papers are written to an audience on an 8th grade reading level, and because many in the area don't have an education, and it is important that the local readership be able to understand the local newspaper. So all of those things are important to consider who's going to be reading what you're writing. So let's look at some examples here of purpose and audiences. So look at the first bulleted item. The purpose is to recommend a student for a scholarship. The audience will be a scholarship committee, and generally these are going to be educated individuals comprised of a group of people who are perhaps educators, instructors themselves, or maybe folks who are in a student service area of a university. The tone that you would adopt would be somewhat formal. You would want to appear very knowledgeable of this individual that you're recommending. You would need to know the individual pretty well, work ethic and those kinds of things. You would also want to appear very credible. So those are some things to keep in mind. The next one is your purpose is to persuade readers to make out a living will. Now, this is a very sensitive subject because we're talking about what's going to happen to you when you're in a life or death situation. And I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Let's go back to that page. So this is a very, again, sensitive subject to many people because they don't want to think about, to perform heroic measures when they are in a life and death situation. The audience is generally to the public. These will be educated people and many uneducated readers. And so you need to make sure that your message is clear, it's simple. You want to adopt a persuasive tone, and you want to be sympathetic to the reader, so that they will at least be sensitive and be listening and consider taking action on this important thing. And lastly, the purpose would be to propose legislation that would require, let's say, motorcyclists to wear helmets. Now, you believe that this is a very important thing and it would save lives. Your audience would be to lawmakers, and these are generally all educated individuals, and so your tone would be assertive. You would also want to be knowledgeable about the topic. You would want to back that up with a lot of evidence and statistics and things like that. So you're going to be very, perhaps adopting an argumentative, and I don't mean fistfight argument, but you want to be very direct and assertive in that this is important and we really need to call folks to action. So those are just some examples of how purpose and audience would come into play. As you assess the writing situation, you definitely want to consider where you will be getting your information if you're having to research and supply evidence. Is it going to come from your reading, maybe from personal experience, your research, or perhaps just observations of yours? Maybe you need to interview experts in the fields, or you need to questionnaire or survey people in the field, or maybe do a poll of some sort to get some information or some evidence that will supply some credibility to your writing. Okay, and then what sort of documentation style is required? And in our class, MLA will be all that we'll focus on. In some composition classes, you may have some experience with APA, and then maybe just a look briefly at the differences in MLA and the two, Chicago style and APA. APA is generally used for education fields and for, let's say, the medical profession. Chicago style is typically for history majors. And as you consider the writing situation, you'll definitely want to know about the parameters of the assignment. For example, the length of the assignment. Are you given a page length? And I will be providing that for you. Does it call for a particular type of paper? For example, a report, a review, a proposal. Is this simply an essay or an analysis of data? Reflection papers are sometimes called for. So the different types of writing call for a different approach. And we'll be looking at some other types of writing than just research papers a little later in the semester. The particular formats, MLA style, and then I will give you all the guidelines that you need for every paper. Lastly here, how might visuals, charts, and graphs and those things convey information? Well, they may be necessary in some types of papers, but in our course, we will use none of those. Our papers are strictly type and paragraphed or organized information, so no graphics or charts, tables, and those kinds of things. They have their place, but we will not be using any of them in this class. And definitely you want to consider who is going to be reviewing your paper in the drafting process. Your peers will be reviewing your papers during peer review editing reviews and things like that. Perhaps you go to a tutoring center or the TRIO Center for some tutoring. And then, of course, I will be reading the final copy. Definitely keep in mind the deadlines. It is crucial that you get started early so that you can meet the deadline without too much stress. Please do not ever wait until the nth moment to get started. It's pretty evident when there's not been enough careful planning, drafting, and revision in a writing assignment. Now, I want us to look at just to sort of recap everything we've talked about in this one handy-dandy handout that I will post in Blackboard for you. It's the PAPA handout, and it's important factors to consider for effective writing. So let's start over here with our purpose. That's the reason why we write. Are we informing? Are we persuading? Are we entertaining? Or are we just simply documenting? And there are a number of purposes. So refer back to the textbook for a more exhaustive list there. And then, of course, we want to keep in mind who is our readership or our audience. Consider the elements like who are they? What are their ages? Are they interested in the topic? What's their education level? If you're writing to an all-female audience, that may be, you may approach that differently than a mixed gender audience. So those are important factors to keep in mind. And then we look at persona, and this literally means mask. It's a Latin phrase. So you consider how you're going to come across as a writer. So what tone do you adopt? A formal one? A sympathetic one? Very knowledgeable one? Humor, again, when and where appropriate. If it's a very serious subject, then humor is not going to be appropriate. And so your tone, the way that you come across, will affect what choice of language that you use, your word choice. That's very important in writing as well. And lastly, your argument. This is what a writer says about the topic, the stance he or she takes, and how the writer supports his or her stance. What evidence or information do you use to support your claim? Now, again, the stance that you take, if it's a controversial issue, you can't just stand on the fence. You have to take a side. That's what you'll be doing in the argumentative paper that we write. You can't just straddle the fence and present information on both sides. You will present information on both sides of the fence, but you have to take a stand. Where do you stand on this issue and why? Okay? So these are important factors to consider.